I saw this really messed up horror movie the other night. It was about this guy who was an insane killer, and he pretty much lived inside of a hallucination. It started out with this guy jogging down some country road, and then a guy pulled up in a van, and the guy in the van knew the guy that was jogging on the country road. The guy stopped jogging and they had a friendly conversation. Then he asked him to get in. He got in, and this suddenly turned the other way. He was telling him that he knew what he had done and that he was going to punish him. But then he said that he didn't know what he was talking about. But then he killed him anyway. And then this guy killed a bunch of people for the rest of the movie. All humans share some very common fears. Loud noises, the unknown, getting eaten by an animal. A common fear is being afraid of swimming in a really deep place. The idea that something can come up out of nowhere and eat you alive is very terrifying. That this thing has an advantage over you. That this thing can come up anywhere, anytime, and cause you a very painful death. All of our common fears are based on instincts. It makes perfect sense from a natural selection efficiency standpoint. If you can imagine two types of people that had to learn to be afraid of certain things, and people that were born with pre-programmed instincts to be afraid of certain things, the people that were naturally afraid of dangerous things would tend to survive, while the other people would not. Once there was a guy who figured out a perfect way to make a ton of money day trading, but this required him to make the decision to make a deal with the devil, or if not the devil, a large number of high-ranking demons. It's kind of related to how people enjoy food during a day of feasting, either a religious feast or a feast on a cheating day of the week. The closer you get to this, the more you realize how much you are going to enjoy this. But something strange happens when you cross a boundary where this shifts from being in the future to when this only exists in the past. An hour or two before a delicious meal, you can't wait. But the moment you take your first bite of this, your subconscious instincts kick in. Before you know it, this has passed, and this exists only as a memory. This guy set up a torture chamber in his basement. It was a 2-stage, 4-day torture. The first 2 days, the victim would watch videos of previous victims being tortured. It was like in Clockwork Orange. He would keep their eyes open and lubricated, and he would have an IV in them so they couldn't go to sleep and they couldn't pass out. They would be filled with amphetamine so that they could feel your heart racing as you watched this. Then after 2 days of watching previous victims being tortured, they would be tortured. It was all set up on autopilot. They would wake up in the basement and not know what had happened or where they were. Their last 4 days on earth would be filled with utter terror and unimaginable agony. While being tortured, they would be kept alive with a spinal tap that would keep them from passing out. It was also the demons could enjoy the feast of souls suffering in maximum torture. And while the demons were enjoying their 4-day feast, this guy would make a ton of money day trading. During those 4 days, he would make a few $100,000. He would do this once a month during the full moon. The rest of the time, he would look for his next victim. His neighbors thought this guy was completely normal, that this guy did normal things like normal people. One of our biggest instinctive fears are based on maintaining social cohesion. It would be one thing to get eaten by a tiger, or get eaten by a shark, or fall off a cliff, but to be left behind by your group would be the worst, knowing you were going to die alone, knowing that nobody in your group wanted you, knowing that they purposely kicked you out of the tribe, that they would rather you die alone and in emotional agony than have to put up with this nonsense. That's why fear of social rejection is as painful today as it ever was, perhaps even worse. That's why many psychological experts recommend that you get rid of social media altogether. Because of modern social media, the fear of social rejection can follow you everywhere. Even if you are all alone, you can still get socially ostracized over and over and over again. Never-ending torture. This guy killed the other guy by burying him alive. He drove him in his van to the cemetery where he had an open coffin and an open grave waiting for him. He made him get in and covered him up with dirt while he screamed for mercy. Then he went home and told his wife what he'd done. Of course, by this point, he'd already killed his wife. And for the rest of the movie, he kept killing people in this small town, imagining that they'd wronged him in some way. And after every murder, this guy would go home and talk to his wife about what he'd done. This is what happens when you are stuck inside of a hallucination. If you think that everybody is after you, then you'll find evidence that everybody is after you. The more fear you seek, the more fear you will find.